This lesson is for Advanced Algebra, Lesson 1-5, using graphs and tables of functions. There's really no notes that I need students to copy in terms of vocabulary and examples. We're simply going to do a couple sample problems. One we're going to do here on the video and kind of have students do along with the video, and then there's another one that they can do for practice with answers provided. We're also going to look at how to do tables on the TI Nspire calculator, and students have the option to watch that portion of the video as well, or simply skip it if they're comfortable. So we're going to look at this first example here of a graph, and it shows distances a person traveled away from home during a 7-hour trip. And there's some questions that I'd like students to be able to answer. For the most part, I think most students can answer them, either without my help or with a little bit of prompting. So that's why we're just going to go over a few of the questions here and see how students fare. First, I'd like students just to create a few sentences, or maybe even an entire paragraph, to describe what might have happened on this journey that the graph is showing. And then they're going to answer some questions. So I'd like students to basically write a sentence that kind of describes each of the sections of this graph. Some of the sections are diagonal, some of the sections are horizontal, and some of them are diagonal at different rates. And so I'd like students to kind of take a moment right now to say a few things about each of those different portions of the graph. So students can pause the video now and go ahead and take the time to do that. Now that you've gone ahead and written some sentences, I'm hoping that some of the things that you included were things like from 0 to 1.5 hours, the person traveled 75 miles. Now, it would be clear here as well that because it's a 75-mile trip in an hour and a half, most likely this person was not walking and not biking. This would have been a travel by car, most likely. After an hour and a half, they definitely stop and they spend some time, and it looks like it's been probably an hour and a half, where time continues to pass, of course, but they stop and do something. So that could have been they stop and visit grandma, they stop and go to a movie, they stop and have lunch, whatever, but the students need to notice that time continues but the distance does not. Then they obviously get back in the car again after they've been gone for 3 hours, and they travel another 25 miles, and again they make another stop and they do something for an hour before they head home. So that was kind of the basic progression of what students should have been able to notice or say about this particular graph. Now let's start answering some specific questions about it. Estimate the distance away from home after 1 hour. So students need to realize that the 1 hour piece here is a independent variable, and so they're going to go along the x-axis to 1 hour and then go up to read what the value is on the y-axis. So that would be a 50-mile distance. Keep in mind that if this were a function, as the lesson indicates, it would be like simply plugging in 1 into the function and seeing what the function would generate at that point. For the next question, estimate how long it took to get 75 miles away from home. On this question, we're plugging in an unknown into the function and we're getting an answer of 75. So we're trying to find what that x value would be. So we're going up to 75 on the y-axis, or the distance axis, and we're trying to read what the time was at that point. We already knew that from doing our paragraph up above, so we know that that answer is 1.5 hours. Students obviously could also write that as 1 hour and 30 minutes. I think students probably already identified the two different variables as being time and distance. It's just a matter of knowing which is which. The x-axis, or in this case the t-axis, is the horizontal one, so that is the independent variable. The time determines how far away you are. So students could either say time, or t, or time in hours. All of those would be appropriate responses for the independent variable. The dependent variable is d, or distance in miles. We've been practicing domain and range, so that's the next thing that I want students to consider. The domain would be the width of the graph, or the horizontal component of the graph, and the range is the height. So you can clearly see that horizontally they've gone from 0 to 7. And so when students write that, they should write the x, or the t variable, such that t is in between 0 and 7. That should be a bracket there, not a parenthesis. And then for the range, very similarly there, the highest away that they get from, or the furthest distance they get away from home is 100 miles. So for that we would do squiggly bracket for d such that 0 to be to 100. And then finally the last question is mostly a notation question that I wanted to help students with. After 3.5 hours, so that's a t value or an independent variable value, they should state their answer using f of x notation and find the distance away. So similar to what we had done on the first two questions, it would be like plugging in 3.5 into the independent variable and finding out what the y value would be from the graph. So if we go over to 3.5 and read what the graph says there, it's going to be somewhere in between 75 and 100. So an appropriate answer there would be something like 80 or 85 miles. And since we did approximate there, we're going to go ahead and use the squiggly equal sign, or the approximately equal to symbol. I've provided another example here using a table, since the title of our lesson today is using tables and graphs with functions. So here's an example of a similar type of situation where students would use a table to answer questions. The answers for these questions are provided at the end of the video. The students may try that on their own and then check their answers. If they have questions, they can ask me during class. The next portion of the video is to help students navigate on their TI Inspire calculators to make tables. And so I'm going to talk through some of the pieces that we're going to do, and then I'll actually demonstrate with my calculator here on the computer. If students want to refer back to what we're doing here, it's coming from activity on page 35 from the lesson. First, we're going to define a function on the calculator on a calculator page, and the buttons that students will be pressing here are menu, actions, and then define. And that will get the define command to show up. And then the formula that we're using is the one right in the activity, 6 minus 1 over 16 times x squared. So I'll demonstrate typing that in on the calculator here momentarily. Once that's done, students need to hit Control and then the I button for a new tab to show up, tab 1.2. From there, they're going to choose a list spreadsheet page, and then they're going to use the menu button several times. They're going to switch that spreadsheet to a table after they hit menu, and then we're going to edit those table settings. So I'm going to demonstrate these pieces right now. I'm going to open up my calculator page, assuming that it pops up here. Alright, so here's my calculator page, and we're simply going to choose menu, actions, and then define. And so the word define shows up. And then we're going to type in our function, f of x. Equal sign is right near your control button. And then we're going to do 6 minus, and to get a fraction you do control divide. And we're going to do 1 on top, hit the tab key to maneuver to the bottom. And the calculator's not cooperating here. Let's do 1 on the top, hit tab, and it goes to the bottom. And then to get it to maneuver away from the bottom of the fraction, hit tab again and it moves to the next cursor space. Use your X key and then you've got two options. You can either raise to the 2 or you can just hit the square key. Once your function has been typed in properly, verify it first, make sure that the look of it is correct in the way that you want it to be, and then hit enter and it should say done. Now we're going to do Control I for a new tab. And we're going to choose spreadsheet and list. Right away it gives us a spreadsheet, and that's not what we want. We want a table. So we're going to hit menu, table, and the only option there is to switch it to a table. Right away you're going to get this little pop-up menu, and it's asking you, do you want to use the function that you just defined? And the answer to that is of course yes. Since that is highlighted, we simply hit either the center touchpad button or the enter button. And you'll see that the x's are already filled in for us in the table, and our function is showing up for the y values. As you maneuver up and down your table, you can get whatever value you wish. You can see here that the x values are currently going up by 1s. There are occasions where you'll want that value to change, And to change that, you simply hit Menu again, Table, and go back to where I was, Menu, Table, and we're going to edit the table settings. It allows you to choose where the table begins, which is sometimes helpful and sometimes unnecessary. We're going to have it start at -5, I believe is what the book wants us to use. And then again, to maneuver inside a menu, it's typically easier to use Tab than it is to use the arrows. Sometimes the arrows mess up the auto functions here, so I usually instruct kids to use the Tab key to maneuver. And the table step is what increment you're using to get from 1x to the next. It's currently set to go by ones. The book asks us in one of the questions that we're going to do to go by 0.2. And I'm just going to tab down to OK. And hit Enter. And so now you can see that the values are increasing. One of the things that I've noticed gives students a little bit of difficulty is sometimes they can't see this column very well because the width is too small. And you've got a couple options here. If you use your touchpad, I'm going to use my cursor to do it, but if you want to use your touchpad, you can maneuver up to the top here. And when the arrows turn to that versus just a single select arrow, you can go ahead and change the size of your column. Another option is to go to Menu, Table, and mine's being sensitive, so let me try that again. If you choose Edit Table Settings, if you choose Menu, Actions, Resize, it allows you to resize the column widths, and you can use your arrow touchpad keys to change the size to whichever column you prefer. So let's go ahead and look at which question they'd like us to do here. I believe it was question number 7. Change the increment to 0.2, which we've just done. And what is the depth of the water after 3.6 days? We can go ahead and scroll to where the x value turns into 3.6. So it'll take us a little while to get there. So we got x of 3.6 and our answer is 5.19. The other answer that they want us to do is what is the depth, when does the depth reach 4.04 inches? So let's go back there. So this time we're looking for the y value to be 4.04, and it looks like we're probably going to want to scroll. So we're going to want to scroll, looks like down until we can get to 4.04, and it looks like we got to 5.6.